This is a story about an elementary school. On the outside, it's a common brick and mortar building. But inside, the rich history is compelling. First constructed in 1958 on the southern edge of a sleepy West Coast Florida town, surrounded by orange groves and horse pastures, Orange Ridge was never meant to be a roadmap for the evolution of public education in the United States. Yet that is what happened. By studying the history of one seemingly ordinary school, one gains insight into the major events that exploded upon our country and shaped the course of public education over the last 6 decades. Even more importantly, Orange Ridge, and eventually Orange Ridge Bullock, gives a real and human voice to the impact these events had upon teachers, students, and families as they navigated the sweep of changing social mores, Supreme Court decisions, and federal legislation. The original Orange Ridge Elementary was typical of old Florida. Single corridor construction with jalousie windows on 2 sides to take advantage of tropical breezes. Like most of the state in the 1950s, there was no air conditioning. Teacher Jim Athens, who began and ended his 40-year career teaching at Orange Ridge, describes how he and his students managed.
We had no air conditioning at all. Our biggest fan in our classroom was our big fan. And we had jalousie windows on both sides. On the side that faced the road was small ones. The side that faced north was large ones.
Orange Ridge was large for its day, built to handle the neighborhood students and those moving to Bradenton as part of the post-World War II population surge. Mr. Athens again.
Well, like today, you have schools like Able and Bayshore Gardens and Prime. We didn't have those. Guess where they went? They went to Orange Ridge. They were bused.
Like most of the South, schools in Bradenton, including Orange Ridge, were segregated. But in 1954, the Supreme Court in Brown versus the Board of Education struck down the idea and practice of separate but equal. Yet change didn't reach small-town Bradenton until the 1970s. Desegregation of school employees occurred first. Then, black students were bused to formerly white schools. Newspapers reported stories about school unrest, reluctant teachers, unruly students. Florida Governor Claude Kirk suspended the Manatee School Board in an attempt to prevent busing. During this time of uncertainty, Orange Ridge persevered with integrity and focus. Teacher Jeanette Kelly was moved to Orange Ridge with little warning.
I was moved from a predominantly all-black school, Tillman, my first 2 years, and I was moved to Palmetto Elementary, which was somewhat integrated, little bit, but not much. And then when the school closed its 5th grade phase, they phased it out, 5th grade out, I was asked to either go to Anna Maria or Orange Ridge, and right away that ticked something with Orange Ridge because of the rumors that you heard about the administration there, and I was apprehensive, but I came anyway because I was a teacher, and I was to teach children.
Right.
And it was not the school, it was the children.
Norman Hinton's experiences began during his student teaching at Bradenton Middle.
Spring of 70, when they began the transition. And that was a unique time because over spring break, a lot of people were moved, furniture was moved between schools, and we came back from spring break. Now we were integrated. But then there was an 8-year period where I was away, went to the military and such. So when I joined Orange Ridge, everything was underway and we were fine.
Mr. Athens and Mrs. Kelly's words speak volumes.
Kids are kids. They're children. And that's what happened. There was no problem at all. I committed in class quite well.
It wasn't about the school. It wasn't about Governor Kurt. It was about the children, my love of children and what I needed to do as a teacher. And my school, and to keep my school functioning. There was love there. That's what I'd say.
I'd say we did a good job blocking out any negativity.
The teachers were both brave and ordinary because this is the way things were done at Orange Ridge Elementary. They kept their focus on the students, despite the outside noise of rumor and resistance going on around them, forging bonds within the school family, including parents. They created a welcoming school for everyone. Teachers modeled for their students what the behavior of acceptance looked like. Integration took a different form beginning in the mid-1970s. A sweeping federal law, Public Law 94-142, required school districts to enroll all children, even those with severe disabilities. Once again, separate schools were considered the answer to this new demand. Parents across the country soon began enrolling their children, but neither they nor the school districts felt prepared. Parent Barbara Lombardo describes what it was like for her son, Chris.
It was a struggle because when Chris was 3, there literally was no place for him to go in a preschool type of a setting. And then eventually at Bayshore Elementary, they did have a varying exceptionality class, and that's kind of how Chris started a little bit with education and learning. And so it was a slow process, and the school system was learning what to do for these children also.
For Manatee parents, the path to the opening of the Bullock School took several years and quite a few twists and turns. Special educator Frida Steingraber remembers those early efforts.
When I first came to Manatee County in 1966, our school was located on the grounds of the airport in an old Army barracks. We were called Sunshine Corners. There were 4 classes then, 2 run by Manatee County and 2 run by Sarasota County. I don't know how long the school had been in existence at that time, but I don't think many years. The lady I replaced was a Mrs. Johnson, and I think perhaps she was the first teacher for Manatee. After that year, the 2 counties separated, and we were moved to a beautiful little schoolhouse on the corner of Prospect and Talavast Roads, and we called ourselves Prospect Center. And there was a lady, a Mrs. Mims, who had been the bus driver, the cook, and the custodian at Sunshine Corners, and she came with us to Prospect Center. However, they did hire a new custodian that year.
These attempts then led to shared space at Blackburn Elementary in Ellington. But the long bus rides prompted the district to search for something more centralized. They found an ideal location on the grounds of Orange Ridge. Credit then Superintendent of Schools Gene Witt, but especially credit Ray Simnecki, the Director of Exceptional Student Education, for his leadership and vision. The new school was designed with spacious, interconnected kindergarten through 12th grade classrooms, therapy, and common spaces, ideal for teaching students with complex disabilities. Mrs. Steingraber again describes the Bullock facility.
When we moved over here, we had much more space, and everybody had, for their children, their own individual bathrooms and things like that that you had to take care of, and it was just a much easier job. But it was a very good move, and we were so proud of our new building too. It was just such a wonderful, and it was a different type of building.
Roseanne O'Brien, another special educator who moved from Blackburn to Bullock, makes this observation.
We came from the country, and now we had heard that, Orange Ridge was kind of like, ooh, who are these people coming, and oh, what's going to happen? And so we went into this new facility, which was space age.
Opened in 1984, the school was named for Jo Berta Bullock, a well-known local high school English teacher who had physical challenges of her own. Mrs. O'Brien recalls how the new school got its name.
It ended up that it was named Jo Berta Bullock School, and I came to understand that this woman was an amazing woman because her whole life she had a challenge, and she had to walk with crutches, and she had to go through all the pitfalls of being this person with a different body amongst a lot of people who had really good functioning bodies. And so she was a fearless and feisty little teacher. She was very short in stature, but she commanded the respect of all of her students. It was a good name for the school, I think.
Miss Jo Berta became a role model and inspiration for students and adults alike.
They liked the fact that she was small, that they didn't feel overpowered by her, and they would run up and give her hugs, and I would see this fearless, feisty woman melt. And so they did. They had a very good bond with each other. She might have been hard on adults, but as, she was never hard on the kids.
Under the direction of Principal Fran Archer, Bullock teachers and therapists used unique approaches to teach practical life and vocational skills. Well-trained aides and teaching assistants helped ensure that students were productive and engaged. Students thrived. Tim Colby remembers transferring a very special student to Bullock.
We had a young man come to us named Brett Wilson, just a marvelous youngster who was stricken with a terminal illness, one of those illnesses that they couldn't treat, and his muscles were deteriorating, and he was confined to a wheelchair, lost his voice eventually, and eventually he came here to Orange Ridge, and that's the connection with Orange Ridge, because they could better care for his needs. But so Brett and I had a bond. He and I both loved the Chicago Cubs, and his parents would bring him to school in the wheelchair, and Brett didn't have speech, but he was the happiest little boy that you just can't imagine, under such duress all the time. This little boy, true spirit, Orange Ridge did a marvelous job with him and all youngsters. You always knew that when children came to Orange Ridge for special needs, the special love was here.
Listen to the pride in her voice as Mrs. O'Brien discusses a few programs.
Actually, there were two programs that still have my heart that we had there. And one was called the Crew Program, and it was community-related experience for work. And what we did is we went and we cleaned a day's inn. We took a crew in there, and we went in and cleaned just as you would if you had the job of cleaning a room when somebody came out of it. That was a real powerful thing. And then we went to King's Wholesale Florist and cleaned flower pots and organized flowers and did all kinds of things like that. And then some of the kids couldn't go off campus all the time, but they loved the job of work. And even the kids that went out to work, that was their big thing. They loved to be productive. So we had on-campus things we did as well. We had an understanding with Chris Craft. And Chris Craft had these bins of all these stainless steel nuts and bolts that, as they were building the boats, would get swept into the floor into these big bins. And our kids were wonderful sorters. We also had this little business, and it was called balloons over Bullock. And so we made custom banners, and the kids worked on computers doing that, and we made balloon bouquets, and we delivered them around the school or to private individuals that would come in. We would make them a balloon bouquet, and the kids loved that because they love carrying balloons around everywhere, and it was very, very happy time.
At first, the Bullock K-12 school and Orange Ridge Elementary simply existed side by side. For example, Bullock students did not venture onto the Orange Ridge campus for meals. Rather, lunches were delivered to them. The state-of-the-art facility that was Bullock stood in stark contrast to Orange Ridge, its aging, neglected next-door neighbor. Chris Baer shares an Orange Ridge teacher's perspective.
There was some fear of the unknown. The part that was new was the transitioning of the two campuses, not necessarily becoming one, but working together as one. We also looked kind of at the staff ratio and the newer facility, or and hard to understand knowing we had maybe 30 kids. Those teachers might have had 8 or 9 with 3 or 4 people in the classroom. It was maybe some, like I said, unknown. I don't want to say ignorance, but certainly just a little bit of, it was a sort of a new way of doing things. So I think it changed, and as usual, change is something that you have to deal with. And I think what we did is we all worked towards making new traditions towards the two schools working together.
As time passed, informal relationships blossomed between the Orange Ridge and Bullock teachers and students. And when Phil Josham was appointed Orange Ridge principal, he allowed Bullock students to eat in the lunchroom alongside their elementary peers. Such a simple gesture with profound consequences, for a barrier had been broken. Mr. Baer again.
I was teaching 3rd grade, and a young teacher named Peggy Welch, who had probably similar age, like a intermediate level students at Bullock, kind of approached us as a class to see if once a week or so we wouldn't want to get together. We had some simple projects to do in order to get the kids to interact. And it was a real great experience. It was interesting to see the difference in, we both wanted to end at the same point, but the ways in which we got there through different styles of teaching because of what the needs of the students were, which today I believe we integrate those into the regular ed classroom anyways, which makes all of our teachers much better at what they do in.
Center schools, such as Joe Berta Bullock, demonstrated how well students with even severe disabilities thrived with proper education and therapy. But parents and educators wanted more choices. Why couldn't children with special needs attend the same schools as their brothers and sisters and make friends with children in their own neighborhoods? In 1990, Public Law 94-142 became IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It demanded that students be educated in the least restrictive setting, which often meant a neighborhood school. When Principal Josham left Orange Ridge, Mr. Simnecki proposed to Superintendent Witt that Bullock merged together with the elementary school under a single principal. Mr. Witt and the school board agreed. Fran Archer was appointed principal, and for an unspecified transition, 2 assistant principals were also assigned. Complicated by the age and construction differences between the 2 schools, not everything went smoothly. Office and custodial staffs were disrupted as departments merged. Bullock students in grades 6 through 12 were transferred to Sugg Middle and Bayshore High. Staff and parents, wary and unsure, noticed what was lost and wondered what would be gained. Parent Barbara Lombardo remembers her fears about her son being moved to Bayshore High.
But I remember us sitting in a meeting and you said, this is really going to be good for Chris. This is really going to be good for Chris. And I tried to convince Chris that I said, you have to think of it as being a pioneer, and you're going to forge a path here. And you're going to show everybody that, individuals like you, are very easy to get along with. And he said, yeah, okay, Mom. But it was, I will never forget it. It was very I felt challenging, especially for Chris, because he's one of the individuals with the sensory, with the noise. But I felt good because I knew some of the teachers, like Roseanne, were transitioning with Chris, and that made him comfortable. And then eventually, he kind of really came home with more exciting news than negative news. And so I felt like, what do we all want for our kids but to move forward and to develop and get, more mature.
Teacher Kim McAfee recalls her early experience.
When I first came to Orange Ridge, the school was simply an elementary school with the Bullock Center in the back. The following year is when we joined together as a single school, and the process of doing that was not only invigorating but quite difficult because we were all learning what to do, how to do it, who we worked with well, etc. But the ultimate goal was to make sure that all of our kids could be successful regardless of their talents or skills, and I think we did a pretty good job doing that.
Jenny Grimes tells us about starting her teaching career at this time of transition.
In 1992, things were still fresh because the school had just joined. It had been two separate campuses, and I think there was like a sidewalk that was connecting the two campuses initially when I first got there. And so there was still a little bit of us and them. But for me, it was just the normal to have my kids help another class get out to PE with the wheelchairs, or to help go through the lunch line, and that it was just normal for me. It didn't seem different because I wasn't there to go through the before and the after. I just kind of came in and merged with what it was at that time, and I can't imagine a school being anything different because. 8-year-old kids are 8-year-old kids. We were able to see that everybody here is just here for the kids, and we're all working just as hard as one another, and there wasn't really a reason for us to be separated because we were just all here for the ORB kids. It wasn't Orange Ridge and Bullock anymore. And although it was sad to see the big kids go because we got used to seeing them every day, we were able to maybe get a little bit closer with some of the younger kids and establish more specific relationships and book buddies and things like that with the mostly age-appropriate students. But I think in terms of the staff, it just brought everyone closer together and more of an appreciation for everybody's different job and everyone's different job stresses and kid worries and things like that.
A complete remodel of Orange Ridge brought expansion, improvements, and technology. But the year of construction, a rocky time with everyone crowded into 20 portables and the Bullock building, made all the difference. By 1994, one school emerged where two had been. Barriers were broken as teachers decided what it really meant to be one school.
Well, when we sat down, as a staff to look at how we were going to place everyone with the new wing and with the ESE kiddos out within their regular grade level areas, we were kind of at a loss for, well, where's my team gonna go? And there was a little hesitance because that Bullock building was something else, and they had, they had the commons where they could all get together and do things, and but there was also a common understanding that it wasn't them and us anymore. We were all going to be in this school together, dispersed, and so the third grade team opted to move our third grade students into some of those rooms in that building. And right across the hall, we had TMH and PMH classrooms. And I think that was one of the ways that just kind of forged the way for us to really collaborate as educators and to get our kids to build that compassion and tolerance and those kinds of things as well. And then it just seemed natural,
It was a time in which innovation and creativity flourished. Michelle Summers and Christina Rogers designed a looping experience for their young students.
What we did with multi-level looping was we looped our children instead of us. Typically in a looping program, you move up with your own class of students. We looped our group of students from my kindergarten class to then become her first grade class. So they were already experienced with the programs that we had put in place, and they became the first grade buddies to our kindergarten student.
We were able, I think, really to find a lot of support. And going back to the looping, those families, they started kindergarten with her, and they knew that next year they were going to be with me. So we kept them in this little cluster, so they knew what to expect. They knew me. Back to school night was kind of a reunion and not, meet your new teacher. All of the things that we've been talking about that we were able to do here, the reason why is because of the administration, the very supportive nature of everyone to allow us to kind of step out and think of new things, new innovative things.
Sue Gore embraced a special needs student into her first grade reading group.
When I had regular first grade, I took upon myself to have one of the ESE children. Yes, he couldn't talk and he couldn't tell you where he was in the book, but the amazing thing, you saw his eyes tracking the words, and I knew that he was comprehending. He also loved being in the group with the other children.
Kate Shao and Pam Tabb share how they combined a special education class and a regular education class.
Well, it seemed really natural to just have all the kids together. We were talking about how the kids could get services no matter where they were at. The OT, occupational therapist, came into the room and they serviced everyone and gave them support. It was just a really good opportunity to have everyone learning together, and it was just seen as one class.
We had the support from the top down, but we also had the support of our peers. The kindergarten team embraced me. They didn't treat me like an outsider. Like Pam was saying, the therapists, they were immediately on board and doing pull-in services instead of wanting to pull the kids out and provide services. And it became this beautiful mix of bringing everybody's gifts to the table, and all the kids benefited. So it was just, the culture of this school was just to bring what you had and share it with everybody, and I think our model really exemplified how that was so effective.
Michelle Romeo recalls how a new playground was built and named after a beloved school volunteer.
We had a playground here that was in very much need of repair. And so we started as a faculty and as parents to do a fundraiser to get the new playground up. And we really came together, the parents came together. I mean, it was difficult because special playgrounds cost a lot of money. We had one special volunteer, Awina Sutter, that also helped. And she actually helped donate the final amount of money to get the playground together, in which we dedicated that playground to her.
Mrs. Gore again explained those days this way.
We're all working with children. So it didn't matter. We were here to teach children. And also, everybody was willing to take that extra step to be a part of this kind of a community. If you didn't want to be this part of a kind of a community, well, you didn't stay here. And as you can see, I stayed here 17 years, so I really liked it here.
Mrs. Lombardo describes a parent's perspective.
In the beginning, you could feel the us and them, but then things seemed to just really come together, and you felt a part of the family, a team, and the teachers always went way beyond just teaching. They gave you a sense of security, too.
For a second time in its history, Orange Ridge proved to be both brave and ordinary. They kept the focus on the students, forged bonds as a new family, while ignoring the outside noise that said inclusion was unrealistic. In doing this, teachers modeled for their students what embracing change looked like. The years passed, and change came at an increasingly fast pace to students and teachers everywhere, including those at Orange Ridge Bullock Elementary School. Rapid advances in technology dramatically altered mundane tasks like attendance and lunch counts. Testing, tracking student progress, and reporting to parents now included an interactive component. Teachers, some reluctantly and others excitedly, found themselves learning new skills right along with their students. At the same time, the neighborhood around the school changed. Families living in poverty and speaking languages other than English moved into the homes within walking distance of the school. In the 1980s, Orange Ridge Bullock became a Title I school, bringing needed federal funding and resources to help students learn English and to catch up on lagging academic and social skills. Former principal Wendy Mongello discusses the connection between poverty and language.
Poverty has a huge impact on children because of where they start in their early years. Many children don't have an opportunity to develop language and vocabulary skills that other children do. And so language is the basis for learning how to read. So when we have students that are coming in to school into kindergarten with very limited experiences to reading or being read to and that sort of thing, that we have a lot of catching up to do.
Assistant Principal Ann Broom describes the additional social skills required of students.
Sometimes even the social skills were things that we had to make sure was part of the curriculum so that students understood that there was behaviors that might have been acceptable because of where they were living. They had to be tough. They had to defend themselves. They couldn't just walk away from something that appeared to be a threat, to now where you're in an environment where you have to tell an adult or share with someone else. So just that social skill of understanding there are different ways to handle a situation depending on the environment that you're in.
Eleuterio Salazar reflects on his memories of learning English while a student at Orange Ridge.
After I was born, we moved to a foreign country, and we lived there for several years. And so when we came back and I entered the school district, I didn't speak any English. So it took me a couple years to learn the English language, which was part of my struggle. But then I came to Orange Ridge, and they were really a huge part of my success. So I really embraced the culture there. I also had a death in my family. I lost my father, and the family there that I had at Orange Ridge was amazing. They were all amazing.
City Councilman Gene Gallo describes how his church became involved.
I think it was probably about 3 years ago when we had some volunteers from our church that were there reading to the students, and they came back to the congregation and was telling us what a great time they were having there. But they had a concern one day on a very, very cold day that there were a number of students coming to school that did not have jackets. And they asked the church if we would consider helping them out. I think they communicated with the staff there, and we found out there was about 60 students that needed coats. And our church collected the money, went out and bought 60 coats for them. But that started us to do more than just read for Orange Ridge. We then decided to adopt them and make them our Day of Hope school.
In 1998, the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test, or FCAT, became the standard measure for all Florida students. And in 1999, FCAT scores were used to assign a grade to every Florida school. Orange Ridge Bullock was one of several Manatee County schools that year to receive a D. Expectations for students to meet grade level standards while overcoming the impact of poverty were never greater. Learning to speak, think, and read in a new language was, for many, an additional complication. Teachers were compelled to find new ways to prepare students for the 21st century. Was Orange Ridge Bullock up to the challenge? Oh, you bet it was. Teacher Kim McAfee explains how the School Improvement Plan initiative was fully embraced.
The environment at Orange Ridge was always about being better. Part of that plan, we call the School Improvement Plan, which was a district initiative, and we actually took it a step further. We created a committee that allowed us to divvy up the objectives in the School Improvement Plan. We had a variety of staff who bought into being chair people for that plan, and we broke it down into smaller chunks so that we could accomplish the plan itself. After several years of doing that, the fruits of our labor came to be when we were named an ACE school at that time. So it was very rewarding.
Former Principal Kathy Hayes McLean proudly shares more strategies that moved them from the grade D to A.
We were just beginning to learn about the state model for formulating school grades. And that first year, we were able to improve our school grade to a C. And after we got the results and disaggregated them, we realized that we would more likely move from a C to an A if we just did some key things in working with students who needed to make gains. And so through a model that we had used at other schools, I'd used this model at Daughtry Elementary when I was an assistant principal, we had a dedicated support time during the day where everyone was working with students who needed direct assistance. And we had a slogan that year. It was actually brought to us by one of the teachers, and it was, we're on our way to an A in 100 days. And we did it. At the end of that year, we raised our grade from a C to an A.
By 2001, No Child Left Behind became the law of the land and laid out bold expectations for all children to read on grade level. The phrase, "no excuses," was repeated as if to simplify the challenge. In Florida, FCAT underwent many revisions over the years. And as Orange Ridge Bullock reflected the ups and downs, some things remained clear. Listen to these former Orange Ridge Bullock administrators describe how they kept the focus on academic success.
It really took a deep look at instruction. It was something that we really needed to look at to see if we were meeting the needs of students, and looking at things in a different light, looking at things that could be innovative to engage students, because students who are coming from a family and living in poverty, the engagement factor sometimes is difficult for students to stay focused. So we needed to make sure that we were keeping our students engaged in the classroom. And we really worked on writing and engaging students in the writing process. And writing really opened up a lot of doors for children because they were able to express themselves in ways they hadn't been able to do so.
One of the things that we did was really broke everyone up into groups. I mean, even Wendy and I, we had a group of students that we were responsible for while we were there. And we had to have data conferences with the students. We made sure they understood the data and what their role was in terms of trying to make these gains and to achieve.
Part of improving students' academics is by helping them understand the value of their education. And so we educate students in many ways, and that is measured in many ways as well. It's not just measured in the test scores. So the first thing that we did is we got an application for the National Elementary Honor Society. So Orange Ridge Bullock was the first Title I elementary school in Manatee County to get the charter and have a group of 4th and 5th grade students become elementary honor students. That's key because our students, just like you, need to know that they can be successful, and that teachers need to know that as well, that all the students that are sitting in our classrooms, we have just as high expectations for them as the schools that are non-Title I schools. That first year, we took 25 5th graders to Atlanta to the MLK Center. It was a grant that was written about diversity, and the MLK grant is about a day of service and a day of work, not just a day off for MLK Day. We took 25 students on a bus to Atlanta, and we visited his home, Ebenezer Baptist Church, where he preached, and the MLK Center. And so the students were able to see all of the things that they read about in history firsthand. The kids participated in the study of our history, of our country. We actually were partnered with a group of middle schoolers who were they were just non-engaged, and our kids had background knowledge, and they answered questions, and they looked, and they enjoyed. And just about every place we went, they said, "Oh, what a great group of kids." And they really are. We had the opportunity, through the group that we went with, we had the opportunity to lay a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. And that was amazing. And to see, oh, goodness, I'm going to cry. But to see our young men stand there and be able to do that, it's just an experience that they're never going to be able to recreate.
It felt so good to know that I came from a background where I didn't know any English, and I learned it. I was accepted, open arms, and now I'm a success. I was a product of Orange Ridge.
Life presents all of us with opportunities to grow, to find our best selves, to be resilient in the face of obstacles. For 58 years, Orange Ridge Bullock was one of those rare places where the right mix of circumstance, history, and generous, good-hearted people formed a school that became a family place, where the teachers and aides, therapists and nurses, office personnel, cafeteria and custodial staffs, administrators, and parents kept their focus on the student. Despite the noise of constant change going on around them, modeling for their students what resilience and achievement looked like. This was the gift of Orange Ridge Bullock, a truly unique place in the history of public education, a school where all children were welcomed, achievement was expected, challenges met and overcome. It was the brightest of moments. It was public education at its very best.